Welcome to day 2 of the Sunset Pond. Awkward cross over my face. Remember, this is book 44 in reading series 1. It is not the companion text. The companion text has much fewer words, and it's for an easier audience, or it's a less challenging book. This is a more challenging book. You've got so much better at retelling by the time you get to this stage. So I wonder if you can use this model to help you work out what are the most important details. Take the not important details and throw them away. But the ones that are really important, they're the ones that help us retell the story. So, using first, next, then, finally, think about how you could retell the story using those words and just the most important details. If you said something like this, then this would be a good retell. First, Matt and Bud went to the pond at sunset. Next, Bud jumped in and fetched a stick. Then, Bud chased a frog. Finally, Matt and Bud relaxed and watched the sunset. Let's look again at vocab words. So when I see the word daffodil, which we worked out the sound of yesterday, it's really important to read it in the sentence to make sure you understand what it could mean and infer. That's actually almost more important than someone telling you what it means, because you've done the work yourself. So let's try it. They ran past the beds of daffodils and down the hill to the sunset pond. Well, the beds might usually, if you're using your schema, refer to flower beds. And you might be thinking flower beds yourself. Well, a daffodil must be a flower, because also if I confirm with the picture, the only thing I can see once I check is that there is a bed of flowers. So I'm guessing that daffodil must be a type of flower. The next word, clump, we need to read it in the sentence. The frog is quick to swim into a clump of grass on the bank of the pond. Well, straight away when it says clump of grass, it tells me that that's something to do with the grass. So if I read that again, the frog is quick to swim into a clump of grass. I can infer that clump must mean like heap or pile of grass. If I'm not 100% sure, I've still done the work myself to try and infer what I think it might mean. On that same page it says, the frog is quick to swim into a clump of grass on the bank of the pond. The bank of the pond. Well, it's beside the words of the pond, so it's got to be something to do with the pond. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. It doesn't show me in the picture. I can't confirm anything in the picture, even though I've tried to sound it out now. So I'm going to have to infer what it means from the rest of the words. The frog is quick to swim into a clump of grass on the bank of the pond. Well, I'm guessing that bank must mean something like edge. Now, this is the one where you have to actually have somebody else help you out. You can infer some of the way, but the rest of the way you need to get there with help. So, to know the word bank, it means like the edge or the side of the pond where the grass comes up in a shape like this. It's where it sort of, the grass dips down into the pond. Now, you wouldn't necessarily be able to know that, so that's why you need someone helping you out as you read. Let's do glints. As the sun slips past the hills in the west, the pond glints red and pink. The pond glints red and pink. I'm going to read that again. The pond glints red and pink. Well, it must be something to do with the sun and the pond and those colors. I'm inferring it's something to do with colors and sunlight. I'm going to read it one more time. As the sun slips past the hills in the west, the pond glints red and pink. I'm going to infer that glints must mean something like shine. I think I've heard it in my schema before that means something like shine or glimmer. And if I check with an adult to ask, is that what it means? Then that would be correct. Parents, if you're helping kids out with inferring, make sure that they give it a go first. It's almost more important for them to do the work and to try and fail rather than for you just to tell them, boop, this is what it is. Unless they just cannot work it out by themselves. Let's talk about some terms that come out of the book. and talk about what they could mean. Now, there are some words that are put together, and when they're put together, it makes a term or an expression. And so we're going to look at this one first. It says, "It is 6:30. It is 6:30. When we find that in the story, it's right at the start, and it shows an image of a clock. So let's look at the whole page to figure out what that could mean. It is 6:30, and the sun has just begun to set in the west. And then they show us an image of a clock. Well, I know from my schema that 6:30 means 6:30, but why have they said 6:30 and not 6:30? I think they're trying to show us another way to talk about the word 6:30, and I think they're also trying to show us that time is going to be a very important idea in the story. It talks about dusk at the end of the story. It talks about the sunset. The timing of the story is very important to talk about to understand the story. Let's look at the second one. The sun slips past the hills. The sun slips past the hills. Well, that's right at the end. And when we get to the end of the story, this is also an important discussion of time. When the sun slips past the hills, what do you notice happens to the colors in the hills? It's windy out there. Yeah, we notice that the colors change, and he's noticed that there's going to be a sunset, so he wants to get out and go and see that sunset. As the sun slips past the hills, it means that he's starting to have these feelings about the sunset and how much he enjoys it. So he wants to think in a poetic way, like he's using poetry to describe how he feels. Sun slips past the hills. A duck drifts on the pond. That was on the same page. A duck drifts on the pond. And I think that's starting to show the quietness and the calmness that's happening at the time. Is that an important part of the story? Calmness? Yeah, that's a really important part of the story. That's kind of why he wanted to go down there by himself with his dog, because it was calm and peaceful. The pond is the best spot to visit. Do you have a spot that's the best spot to visit? And did you get those terms? Best spot, drifts on the pond, slips past the hills, 6:30. When you put words together, it creates a term. And I would say the best spot to visit, well, that's the whole story, isn't it? They tell us throughout the whole story why it's the best spot to visit. Do you know why it's the best spot to visit? And do you have your own? Okay, first grade. Now it's time for you to go and enjoy this text by yourself.